Yeah.
So we would bring in a representative for someone to hold that space for the father who's deceased, and for the client to be able to say, you left a huge missing hole. And I was told, I'm the man of the house now, Dad, and I took on all of your responsibilities and none of them were mine. And so we start to reorder the reality of what happened so that he can now show up in his marriage or as a father or in his profession with more clarity, with more authenticity, versus all weaved in from the trauma itself.
Hello, and welcome to the Liminal Frequencies podcast, where we dive deep into healing frequencies from our ancestors, frequencies of the earth and stars, sound, color, and light, and all of the subtle ways that we can tap into our unique vibration to awaken the highest timeline and integrate the fullest expression of our being. Now let's dive in. What a powerful time to be alive in these transformations. I wonder how the eclipse in Libra has landed for some people. I know it's not a thing that just happens in 24 hours, but a larger transformation in how we relate to each other and how often we decide to sacrifice our own needs for other people. I think we're going to see a big shift in how people are getting diseases like cancer and autoimmunity, where people are going to be starting to realize that they need to fulfill their own needs first. And with that being said, I pulled a card from the Sacred Earth Oracle, Tony Carmine Salerno and Lilia Williams. Beautiful oracle deck. And the card is center. Do not confuse selfishness with self-centering. Bring your well-being, your values, your future, and your loves to the center of your world. Break the old habits of objects and relationships that insist you revolve around their needs and demands. Being centered makes you stronger and more balanced, and disturbances are less likely to knock you off course. Extend your positive sphere of influence. And that reminds me of, I was in a session and I received why am I spending all this energy revolving around others when they should all revolve around me? Sometimes we forget that we are adults and we're not in a place of being able to be the center of our universe, but sometimes that's how we have to go back, is to the center. So today I have a very intriguing interview with Johanna Lynn, and actually a few weeks after our interview, I reached out to her to work together to receive a constellation session. And it was really incredible, the insights that I received about my own family and my own life and how I could just fill in those little gaps. And, as a child, we don't know the million things that was in our mother's head, the million things that our siblings were doing other than holding space for us. And it wasn't our job to know. But in order to just fully integrate ourselves as adults, it's really helpful to have somebody come through and receive the guidance that we need to receive about that. Johanna Lynn is the founder of the Family Imprint Institute with 16 years of experience resolving inherited family patterns. With an international practice, she supports clients to release emotional imprints, transforming painful patterns like people pleasing and challenges with boundaries into healthier relationships. Johanna's unique approach uncovers the roots of your challenges, leading to profound and lasting resolutions. So without further ado, let's bring her on. Hi, Johanna.
Hello, nice to be here with you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to speak with you about your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you want to tell us what started your journey into constellation therapy and into healing relationships?
Well, it was a very personal one. I came across this work at a perfect time. My relationship, well, my marriage dissolved after the announcement of an affair, and I was really seeking answers to understand what had led up to that. And I really was conscious that I did not want to repeat those same patterns. And so it had me look down the avenue of what did I contribute to the distance before the affair? How did what were some of the things that I could learn about myself so that I wouldn't find myself in the same position in another relationship? I've certainly had clients and friends who could recover after an affair, but that just wasn't in the cards for us. I think it reflected a lot of the pain and the challenges that were already in the marriage to begin with. And I happened to cross paths at the perfect time with who became my most influential teacher and allowed me to learn this to share with clients today. It was perfect timing, as they say.
Yeah, and you find the gems in those things that are really hard, even, maybe a little bit later, you find those gems.
It took a while, but the truth is that was the time in my life where I grew the most. And yeah, it was through a lot of raw vulnerability, but gosh, I really came through the other side with a deeper understanding of myself and of relationships and found my way to the most rewarding, amazing work that I get to do.
That's amazing. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear more about your family, your experience with family, and how that led you on this path.
Yeah, I think any one of us who are therapists or coaches or who offer guidance to others, we do so for a reason. We've had to figure out our way through, gosh, our own challenging experiences through family, through relationship, and I'm no different. Yeah, there were some definite relationship repairs required, specifically with my mom. And I think that is what leads me to really, even though I've been in this work almost 20 years, I'm still endlessly fascinated by how that first love, our first imprint with our mom, ends up setting the stage and shaping our future relationships.
Yes, I've discovered this too recently that the relationship that we have with our partner, it can resemble a lot of ways what we weren't getting from our mother.
Yeah, we sort of say in this work that systems marry systems, or we fall in love with the familiar. And so it might not be evident, on the first date or while we're really in that getting to know you exciting phase, but there's something that feels so familiar at the beginning, and it tends to match up with our deepest wounds, our deepest hurts from our very, very early life experience.
Yeah, it's true. Those times are very formative in early childhood where we start to establish, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, do you call this internal family systems?
No, that's different. So, family constellations has been around a little over 50 years, and it looks at you as an individual in the context of your whole family system.
Okay. And internal family system is about your inner parts and how you, like the reflection of how you, in your upbringing, if you didn't have the support that you needed, that you might create extra support from within in the terms of different inner parts.
Yeah. As anyone knows that's been on the personal healing journey, there are many different parts of ourselves that come into the equation. And it can be very powerful work as well. There's a lot that overlaps about the two, actually.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it almost feels like the external, when we can look outside of ourselves and see our family in our environment or in the trees or in objects that we're connecting with. And when we can look inside and we can see inside, we also have our own little microcosm of family.
Absolutely true. And I think really, maybe some of your listeners are parents and you sort of, oh, that thing I just said, that sounds like my mom. Or the way I responded, gosh, that was what used to bug me about my dad. And so even within us, we hold our parents inside. And I think the more light we can shine on that, the more we can become aware of that, the less we're led by it unconsciously.
Yeah, absolutely. Once we look into the shadow, we can't go back, right?
Right.
Are you familiar with Mark Wallen?
Oh, he's my most influential teacher. He's the guy, yeah.
Love it. I have his book. I sent a copy to my mom. And yeah, I just been doing this work, and I actually did a little bit this morning, was journaling about the major health challenges or the major relation challenges, the major challenges in life, and the statements of fear that can be brought up, and how to connect that with an ancestor, which for me, I work with the Akashic Records. And so it can be very eye opening to make that little connection. And maybe it could lead me into a past life regression. I could really interface with that experience that that person has. Or I believe that the Akashic Records are kind of similar to the unified field, or the field that is used. The unified field in family constellations as well. And so you can tap to that knowing of what may have happened, or the stories, even whatever happened, but the stories that are being held in your subconscious.
Yes. Yeah, that's very well said. And it's so surprising how it shapes our lives just from behind the scenes. It is wonderful how familiar you are with this work. The book has been life-changing, and that's what I share the most with clients and friends. I love that you sent it to your mom. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so sweet. And there's so much that for me was really beautiful in my journey, uncovering the intergenerational trauma that I knew that I had a pretty good childhood. Nothing's perfect. I could have had some more support in a lot of ways, but knowing that the grief that I had was not unfounded, that there was something beneath it, other than just where is this coming from? And I had a story about like a breathwork ceremony that I did, and this one song that they played, it was an Irish song. It was really just, the songs were all meant to be really evocative, emotionally, really loud, and I just started sobbing out of nowhere. And it happened again too. The next time I was in the ceremony with the same group, they had a playlist, and I was like, there's must be something to my Irish heritage, that there's some sadness and grief and loss in there.
That deep connection that just came right through the music. Incredible. Yeah.
What are some of the practices that you've integrated since you've learned this work in your own life?
There's so many. Which ones to share that would be most beneficial? I think for me, it's given a new lens, almost like you said before. Once you go down and look at the shadow, there's no going back. It's kind of, once you start to think systemically, there's no way to get locked in only taking something personally. There's sort of something always behind it, that larger picture always present. And so I think that's been one of the greatest practices, that even when something happens, a trigger occurs, that I'm able to kind of press pause in the reaction, so to speak, and take a look at what's really going on here, what are really at play, so that I can walk it back and respond in a way that feels more real, more authentic, less reactive, less from a triggered place. And so that's been a huge gift in my own relationship and raising our son, just to be able to come from the larger picture place in most cases and most times. That's been a real gift with a new perspective.
Yes, a different lens to look at the world.
Yes, it's needed.
Yeah, when we have the blinders on and we're kind of focused on the goal, and we don't quite see how these patterns might be. And how has this work changed your relationship with your family, or what work have you decided to implement since you learned about the lens?
I think my own parents are less open to personal growth work. They wouldn't know what to do if I gifted them the book as you gifted your mom. They would be they just Like, what are you saying? Are you saying we were bad parents? Or, they would take it
Uh-huh.
personally, I suppose.
Perhaps
And
it's
so,
it's just by osmosis, right?
well, for me, it was very intentional personal work
Yeah.
that I had to change sort of the backpack of resentment, or the any kind of pain that I might have been carrying along with how things went, and to really move to that larger context, like I was sharing before, of what was behind my mom's criticism, what was behind my dad's emotional distance, and to really see them in the viewpoint of what was their childhood like, and how did life shape them, and to really live from this deep place of acceptance that these are all of the amazing things that they could give me, and I receive that fully. And I also really accept and just am okay with the places that they may not be able to go with me. They're not going to talk about a book like Mark's with me. They're not going to want to go into those deep emotional places or spaces. That's just not what's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable for them. And
Yeah.
being okay with that.
Yeah, some people I did some work with or just some reading about my astrology, my Pluto, and my
Yes.
Pluto is in the house of communication, which means
Ah,
that I'm the one that will discuss the hard thing, and that gave me a lot of validation because I know there's a lot of people who are avoidant or they're just not comfortable going there.
right.
And, that's okay because they have other areas where they shine and they have other ways to do the work that they're doing. But, most importantly, I think when your family, you go through these things together, but on your end, you're clearing something and it is
Mm-hmm.
clearing in a quantum. And so in a quantum field, in a way, they're receiving that healing too.
Yes, I really believe that. I think as we show up in the relationship different, right? More open, less resentful, more loving, more understanding, it can't help but change both sides of things. And so, really, I think many of our parents are at an age and a stage where they're probably not going to change that much. And so, it's really been okay for me to live from this place of the changes in me and how I respond to them and reach out to them. I'm okay with it being generated through me. And so, just kind of accepting that, and it's changed so much. The relationship is just so much more easy instead of sort of filled with expectation and nervousness and how might it go. It's taken
Yeah.
on a whole path.
Yeah. It sounds like you're doing the heavy lifting though.
Well, the benefit is all for me, to be honest, in
Yeah.
that the situation and the relationship with my parents now is much less likely to play out in my marriage, much less likely to be lived out in our son. And so that's the key thing, that a lot of the intergenerational work really stems at this ends with me. Like, it's okay if I'm the one that's doing a bit more of the heavy lifting because I'm the one
Right.
that's looking for the change. I'm the one that doesn't want to pass on this pain. And so my perspective really changed once our son came into the picture.
Wow. Tell me about that.
Well, I guess it was this feeling that I wanted to protect him, and sort of that motherly protection, and didn't want some of what was unresolved inside of the family system to be on his shoulders. Which, if what we don't resolve, our kids are much more likely to have to sort out or carry through.
Yeah, I really think, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say everybody should do this work. Everybody who wants to benefit and they want their children and the future generation to benefit from this work. It's really beautiful that we can move these things and not have that be the burden of the next generation to because I think things have changed from this like silent generation where these I've heard so many crazies, I'm sure you have heard so many
Mhm.
crazy stories about people's families and things that they weren't saying in the fraternity questions and the children that were resented because they had the same eyes as their parents and these generational things where as things kind of move forward people start to become more open to talking about their trauma and their pain and have it be okay. I ran into a woman um, and she was like, my parents or my daughters, we're great, but they had to tell me that that I fucked up first, and we had to have that experience of that healing experience. And I was like, wow, I would never say that, because I know what my parents have been through, and I know that, things have been hard, and I know that they did what they could. But at the same time, I think that there is value in bringing truth and awareness to where we are at, and being honest, having somebody have that experience of, because, recently I had an experience with somebody and it wasn't a positive experience. It felt, it left a bad taste in my mouth. And I had to kind of derive from that experience, like, in this circumstance, I did not really want to, but I felt like there was actually a really important thing for me to share and give feedback, and in a very respectful and tactful way and a forgiving way. But that when we miss that opportunity to communicate, we never get that opportunity back.
That's it. And I think from a systemic perspective, these family secrets can be a lot like a snowball downhill. It just gets faster, it gets bigger, it has more destructive power to it. And so the things that are unresolved, if you're a parent listening, can you share that with your child? Age appropriate, of course, if it's really scary and really intense. But the less we know about ourselves and our family history, the more we can unknowingly repeat some of the most painful aspects. And so the more equipped we are, the more we know, life is just an easier path.
Yeah, that's really true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with your work, how does this also connect with people pleasing and accommodating people through a relationship?
Yeah, the roots of people pleasing really do come from our family of origin. And so just imagine a young girl who's, I don't know, 3 years old, 5 years old, in that range, and really notices if I'm loud or if I have needs, the natural normal needs of a child, it makes mommy mad. Or another situation where you're raised in a home where addiction takes the forefront and your needs feel smaller and smaller and smaller, that there's this part of you that sort of leaves the developing part of yourself, that child part of yourself, to be over there with the parent who's struggling. And so there's like this hyper alertness around, who do you need me to be? The helpful one, the quiet one, the performative one, whatever, so that you're okay. And so this is the roots of people pleasing, where we grew up in a family where our parent needed us to be the straight A student, the star football player, the whatever it is, that we feel we have to go out of ourselves to be loved and accepted for who we are. And so then our boundaries, our sense of self gets really blurry because we're out there doing for the other what we think they want. And so this might make us a very, the friend that always helps the other friend move, the accommodating, always listening and never really being able to have that balanced piece inside the relationship. And so whenever I've read books about boundaries or people pleasing, it doesn't seem to go all the way. It's not just as simple as learning how to say no, because these roots are really inside of our childhood and inside of our worth and what we think we need to do to keep the relationship on good footing.
Yes, that's really well put. I love that. And many of us have, like, unless we go to the root, right? We're going to have no idea why our behaviors are the way that they are.
Exactly. We're just kind of in this awful route of repeating them because we don't know how to get to that root. Yeah.
And so for people that you work with, is it mostly just the awareness of those patterns that helps to break the cycle?
That's certainly the first step. And then the beauty of constellation work is a series of experiential exercises, because we've got to drop into the body where it's held and where this is who I think I have to be for relationships to go okay. We've got to be able to work with that part of the body to be able to find peace and resolution so that we can hope that we can come from a different place the next time someone asks something that feels like it's very overextending. Or even going back to visit that parent where you were in the role of taking care of them and to reorder the relationship so you can show up as the daughter or as the son instead of the caretaker, instead of the responsible one, instead of the one that everybody leans on.
Right, because we are filling those roles based on what is needed. What I heard about astrology is that there are oftentimes the mother and the father, they manifested by conceiving a child. And so, like, for example, I'm a Virgo sun. Oftentimes when people have a Virgo sun, it's because they need a child to parent them. And then there has to be some kind of renegotiation of roles, right? Because children should not be parenting.
That's right. Gosh, I'd never heard that. How interesting.
Yeah. And so I noticed, like, yeah, there are parts of my relation and you too. Like, it sounded like you said, you're showing up in this way for your parents, and you're kind of like, okay, no, everything's okay. Like, and I'm taking care of myself, and it's really important to do that too. But I thought it was interesting how we fill these different roles depending on what our karma is, what our parents were manifesting, what was needed. And if we come into a family where our parents they need a little extra help, they're a little stressed, then we're going to fill those roles, because naturally as children, we're very empathic. And as we become even more empathic, we tap more into our healing abilities, right? Because we sense around us the trauma and the stressor in our environment, and we feel ourselves filling those different shoes that, becoming the therapist, the little tiny therapist, or
yeah, it's the deep love of a child. It's innate that gets filled. And I think some of the most memorable cases are in families where, let's say, the father dies suddenly, and now the little boy is told, you're the man of the house now. And how damaging that is when this man becomes 40 and 50 years old and tries to take his own space in the world, not have to be the responsible one, to be able to put his own needs somewhere on the realm of what's important instead of giving it all away for the crisis at hand. And so the things that happen in our families, they shape us so immensely. And I just think we're not taught to consider that when we're looking to unravel certain painful patterns, or when we've reached a breaking point in our relationship. A lot of the times we're looking for strategies instead of looking back to understand ourselves more.
And I'm really curious if with the constellation therapy, are we able to fill in and bring constellations in that this family needed a second parent or a third parent or whatever, or a second parent. This family needed this. This family needed maybe like somebody to stand in as a therapist and bring those constellations in to balance everybody out in kind of a quantum way.
No, maybe there are constellators that do that, but I stay very grounded in this realm because we have to live within this family.
Okay.
And so instead, let's say we'll use that example of the missing father, maybe lost his dad when he was 4 or something.
Yeah.
So we would bring in a representative for someone to hold that space for the father who's deceased, and for the client to be able to say, you left a huge missing hole. And I was told, I'm the man of the house now, Dad, and I took on all of your responsibilities and none of them were mine. And so we start to reorder the reality of what happened so that he can now show up in his marriage or as a father or in his profession with more clarity, with more authenticity, versus all weaved in from the trauma itself.
Okay, so we do bring in somebody to hold the space that was missing. And,
that's right.
And then once we are able to orient our perspective around that, it's easier to fall back into the role that you have instead of trying to take on that accessory role.
Yes, that's very well said. It allows us to really be more of ourselves instead of the patchwork pieces that we might have had to take on depending on what happened.
Wow, I love it. I loved our talk, and I want to share a little bit more of Lulu Williams' interpretations of the center. Within our complex galaxy, many centers of gravity. The same is true for all complex beings, you included. We come into this world with love at our center, but disturbances can knock us from our orbit. When this happens, our immediate center of gravity shifts, and we can settle into orbit around all manner of people, values, and expectations. But love is the brightly burning sun at the true center of your world, and its invisible pull brings you even closer to its glorious light. Isn't it so true how easy it is to be sucked into somebody else's gravitational pull when you know where your sun is, you know where your light is and your center of gravity. And relationships are so beautiful and nourishing because they show us what's happening within and how our family years can be so formative for understanding how we have gotten into these patterns and how we can shift them for the better to be in a spiritually supportive state. And isn't it so interesting how we revolve around these different elements and aspects through our families, through our relationships? Thank you so much for joining today. My goal is to create conversations and community in which we can up-level ourselves and humanity. And I just have a vision of seeing this as a thriving community for entrepreneurs and light workers. So please like, 5-star review, and share the show with as many people as you feel it would resonate with. Let's all take care of each other and make sure that we're all receiving the love and the reparenting that we need. If you would like some more support, I offer one-on-one guided work in the Akashic Records, where we can journey through all time and space and meet the guides that are ready to help and support you to up level by connecting with your inner child, by connecting with your higher self, and by connecting with your guides. You can help to transcend some of the difficult things that you've been moving through in your relationships, trusting yourself, moving into this amazing role of an entrepreneur. So please let me know if you would like to do that. And I have some links in the description for joining my community of entrepreneurs. I'd love to see you there. And I am so excited for the next episode.